Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ben Haddad. I'm the Senior Director at the Europe Center here at the Atlantic Council. I'm really delighted to be introducing this conversation today with the Foreign Minister of the Czech Republic, Jan Lipavský, on his first visit as Foreign Minister to the United States, where he will meet later today Secretary of State Tony Blinken. Jan Lipavský has really risen in the last few months as Foreign Minister as a key voice in Europe for the defense of human rights and democracy, especially in the context of Russian aggression against Ukraine. As our transatlantic unity stands firmly in support of Ukrainian democracy and sovereignty, with sanctions against the Russian regime, with weapons delivery to Ukraine to help Kyiv defend itself, we're delighted to be having this conversation with a key ally within the European Union and within NATO. The Czech Republic has been a key partner of the Europe Center at the Atlantic Council, and we're very happy to be hosting a visiting fellow from the Czech Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Petr Tuma, who has been with us for 2 years, has been really a leading expert on the role that Central Europe can play within the European Union and NATO, and we look forward to the partnership going forward in the next few years. Minister Lipavský, it's great to have you with us. We've met in the region in the last few months, and we really appreciate the important leadership that your government has taken in the support for Ukraine. We'll be talking today about this. We'll be talking about the importance of defending democracy against authoritarianism, both abroad, but also at home, and pushing back against corruption. We'll be talking about the importance of transatlantic bonds for this. And with this, let me turn it to my colleague, wiser, distinguished fellow, and Ambassador Dan Fried, who will be moderating this conversation. Thank you very much.
Minister Lipavský, what a pleasure. But the trouble is, you're coming to Washington in a time of war. That's not a war the Czech Republic or America are involved in directly, but it's a war nevertheless, a war of aggression in Europe. It's a big deal. The tyrants think their time has returned, that the future belongs to them. They're echoing their early and mid-20th century predecessors, I fear. But it's a tough time. Assess it for us. What are the challenges how do you see the challenges in Europe? How do you see Russia's attack on Ukraine? And this is my real question. How are we doing? How is the West doing? How is the United States doing? So a nice, easy one to start with.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much, Ambassador Fried, for this kind invitation to the Atlantic Council. How we are doing as a Western society, as Western civilization. We are doing well. We have proven that we have these reflexes, that we have reacted in the right way. Look what was happening during autumn. Putin manipulated gas prices in Europe. Putin created artificial migration crisis on the borders between Belarus and Poland. He used all his hybrid recipes to stir disunity in Europe. And still, Europe is united, transatlantic, both sides of Atlantic are united on those basic things. We have 5 packages of sanctions. A European Foreign Affairs Committee with Tony Blinken was against with united voice. We all agree that this is a brutal, barbaric war, unprovoked war, and of course, not every state is doing the same level of help to Ukraine. We differ on, for example, Ukraine's perspective in the EU, but that's not important. We as a Western society, we have shown that we are able to protect the values on which the international order is built upon, and what is important for us, for our very existence, for what we believe, the freedom. You know, I'm saying that Zelensky was elected, democratically elected. That's something Putin don't know. And how we are standing, how we are doing. So the Czech Republic, we are being paid for our dedication to become the EU and NATO member. The reason why we have wanted to be part of those two organizations is that it won't happen to us. And Ukraine wasn't developed, wasn't fast, wasn't advanced enough to make it into this luxurious club. And that created the gray zone, a place for Putin to start his imperialistic vision, to play his games. And but the people of Ukraine, they made a decision. They want to be part of Western society. They want democratic elections. They want freedom of speech. They want to participate on prosperity, which is connected to these values, to values of openness and creativity. And I feel our moral responsibility to help them, not to become a part of Putin's Union, Putin's Soviet Union, whatever we call it. How US is standing, I'm grateful for what the US is doing and what the US was doing before the war. I would like to remind that it was the US and the UK, two countries which were providing real weapons in real amounts to Ukraine army. Rockets, anti-air, anti-tank rockets. And that supplies helps to Ukraine army to withstand the very first days when the Putin made a wrong strategic decision and attacked in all directions. You know, without those supplies, I'm afraid the situation on the ground would be much different. So, U.S. has proved, and the other states proved that we have these strategic reflections, strategic thinking, and that we can, in the end of the day, do real action. And now, many Central European countries are helping to Ukraine to survive with this war. The Czech Republic is providing weapons. Poland is providing weapons. Poland is key in supplying and also providing weapons. We give quite a lot of humanitarian aid, which is necessary. We have this like almost 7 million migrants and IDPs. We are helping Ukraine politically. So I think we could be. I think there's a positive on my side. It's a positive evaluation.
So the Czech Republic, just for the record, was one of the authors of NATO enlargement. Václav Havel, along with Poland's Lech Wałęsa, pushed Bill Clinton on NATO enlargement. And one of their arguments that I was around, I remember it, was, we have a window now to do it. Don't you Americans blow it. They didn't put it quite that way, but that was more or less their way. So you were right. But here's another question. Here's a follow-up. Secretary of State Tony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin were in Kyiv on Sunday. They came back, and when they were in Poland, after they got out of Ukraine, they gave a press conference, and they both said, Secretary of Defense Austin was quite sharp about this. He said that our objective is to help the Ukrainians win and to weaken Russia so it cannot do something like this, that is, invade one of its neighbors again. Now, this has been criticized by some in Washington, and I think some in Europe, as being too harsh, as alienating people or being too confrontational. So I know I'm putting you on the spot. What public message should we be giving? Is this the right one?
So I am very happy for those words. And it's one equation: weaken Russia, strengthen Ukraine. Therefore, we have a Ukraine win in their fight for freedom and territorial integrity. And we have to understand that Russia has attacked in unprovoked way its neighbor. And the logical and immediate behavior, for example, of Sweden and Finland, state which on purpose was not member of NATO or any kind of military bloc after the Second World War, their position has shifted because they don't trust that neutrality would provide them security from the Russian imperialistic dreams. So we have to contain Russia, and that includes not only building up our own defenses, but to be undercutting their ability to wage a war. This one in Ukraine, and the war which might come, the future wars. And that's what we have to be thinking also when interacting with China.
You just mentioned China.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that Czech leaders have been pushing back not just against Putin's aggression, but against China's. And the mayor of Prague, a little while ago, seemed to take on the Chinese. He was put under a lot of pressure by China because he had been reaching out to Taiwan. Do you think he went too far, or do you think that it's important for the Czech Republic to set kind of a moral example, as Lithuania has done?
Zdeněk Hřib, he's a very good friend of mine. He's from same party actually as me. He played what mayor of city can play. Of course, he can go much farther in his statements and certain actions. Still, it's not international politics. It's more about cities' relationship and saying political statements, but from the position of mayor. And I will give you a little illustration how that paid off to Prague. So the previous government of Prague, which put it in a sister city agreement between Prague and Beijing, the sentence that the Taiwan is a part of China, they promised a panda for that, panda bear. The panda never arrived into Prague. And Mayor Hřib, he wanted to amend the sister city agreement between Prague and Beijing just to remove this sentence which doesn't belong into the politics between cities. It's a matter of international politics. It's something which, for example, I should be dealing from the position of government and Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the Beijing got upset, that you have mentioned.
Right.
But the Taipei reacted in a very nice way. And they were able to make a deal that the little pangolin, which is quite strange and very funny animal, has arrived in recent weeks into Prague. So Taiwan is able to fulfill its promises, actually. that's the point I would like to make here. So our zoo in Prague now has this beautiful pair of two animals. And we generally have a very good relationship with Taiwan. From the business perspective, it's much more relevant than doing business with China, even though, of course, the trade with China is important part of our supply chain, and we have to respect it. On the other side, the reason why I am bringing up China, it's not just about some kind of symbolism, but the fact that in the long term, the China is the systemic rival we need to be thinking about, since Russia is more crumbling into itself, and the Putin's wars against Ukraine is a demonstration, in the end of the day, the inability to do successfully major things, even though they do extreme harm. But the China, with its force and with its vision to change the international order, this is something we shouldn't be forgetting about.
That sounds to me like you're calling for the US and Europe to consolidate themselves as a democratic counterweight to China's efforts to game and exploit the international system.
Yes, I do. Maybe I'm not calling for that in such a concise and united way. Maybe you are just identifying it.
Okay.
On the other side, this is a quite complicated debate with just many layers and many sectors, and interdependency between
Right.
between the EU and the US and China is much stronger than with Russia. For example, the trade of the Czech Republic between the Czech Republic and the Russia was of the same amount and importance like the trade between the Czech Republic and Belgium. For example, that's something you can do, which is not playing a pivotal role in your industry. The China plays a pivotal role in our economy. So we have to be more careful, but still not to forget about our values and about our interests. So it's a much bigger challenge.
It is a bigger challenge, and that's well put. The Chinese challenge to the international system is different than Russia's. Putin wants to blow things up. Well, literally, as we're finding out. China wants to use the international system rather than destroy it. So the challenges are different. I appreciate the point.
Yes.
And we all have to reckon with a different kind of challenge. Let me go back to Russia, though.
Yeah.
You've described Putin's war accurately, I'm sorry to say. It's ugly. It's brutal.
It's a sickening act of barbarism.
It is. Now, here's a tough question for you, and one that I don't have the answer to myself. Can Russia be better than this? That is does Russian history inevitably or close to inevitably give us this kind of aggressive autocrat? Or is there a better Russia that's possible? And how do we see our way past this challenge, which I think you've described well, right, of Russia's aggressive war, to a better future? It seems like a stupid question at this time, now that we're dealing with the real war, but I'm trying to think ahead. And honestly, I have in mind my friend, the Russian democratic dissident Vladimir Kara-Murza, who believes in a democratic Russia and is now in prison.
Yes.
I saw him in Berlin right before he went back to Russia, and I told him, be careful. He didn't need me to tell him. He knew the risks. And yet he did it because he believes in his country. But what's your sense? And I ask because Czechs have to live with Russia. You've had to think about this.
Yes. So I don't believe that there would be any kind of national trade which would prevent from Russians to have a democratic system. They can have it, and they had it in 90s formally until the Putin, got to power and there's no democracy anymore. On the other side, there is more to democracy than to have a good constitution on a paper. You need a society which understands it, a society which protects it, a society which lives the democracy. Democracy is about participation. And sadly, currently, I don't see a society in Russia which would be able to properly fulfill what the democracy is. But why? Because every attempt to have certain democratic system in Russia Imperia was almost immediately destroyed. And what was being Putin doing last 20 years almost? Getting rid of democratic opposition, any relevant, significant forces. And last 2 months, we've witnessed this closure of the last freedom media, which were at least for a long time allowed in Moscow. So that is really, at this moment, it is a really dark time for the Russian democratic forces. But that should be imperative for us to support and work with Russian democratic opposition, which fled to Europe, to the US. In Prague, we have this Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty.
Yep.
US Congress-sponsored activity under the umbrella of Global Media Agency. I visited today boss of this organization, and we are very happy to host Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty in Prague, and to hope that at the next shift of power in Moscow, there will be circles who will understand that the imperialistic style of ruling Russia is not the best one, that maybe to be a full and fully respected member of international community, to have some kind of democracy would be better for Russia, and that the society would start to be building that. But it means it takes a long time, and until Russia internally grows to that moment, we need to be prepared to contain their military possible aggression.
I think you're right about the tasks now, that is, contain their aggression. I also think that what you've implied is that we should invest in the potential for a better Russia in the future.
Yes.
And that means, we have an obligation to support, all of us have an obligation to support the Ukrainian refugees fleeing the war. There are a lot of them. And I will say my government should be doing more. We've now said we're going to take in, I think, 100,000 refugees. Well, I think we could be doing more. But in addition, there are Russians of a more democratic orientation, a pro-democracy orientation, who've been forced to flee their homes. And I hope we can also welcome them. I mean, yes, we have a different kind of obligation to the Ukrainians, and there are far more of them. But an investment in the future in pro-democracy Russians, helping them work and live in our countries as an investment in the future might be useful. I'm just thinking to apply to Russia some of the same policies that were so successful during the communist period for countries like then Czechoslovakia and Poland, where, emigres were in Munich working at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty before we moved it to Prague.
Yes.
Look, these are hard times. You're going to see Secretary Blinken.
Yes, I do.
So, all right, let me peer into your briefcase and your memo and ask what advice you have for the Biden administration. Because, your government's, your country knows the consequences of policy failure. I remember traveling to Prague with Madeleine Albright after NATO had invited the Czech Republic to join the alliance.
Yes.
And I remember, you're not going to believe this, we were traveling in, there was a motorcade from the airport, and there's this point, you remember, where you go over a hill and you can see Prague laid out before you. And there was a rainbow.
Oh.
And we thought, okay, we've
Good
done
sign.
the right thing, good sign. And Madeleine Albright helped make that possible.
Yes.
But she made that possible because she knew she had suffered the consequences of policy failures, including American policy failures. In 1938, in 1939, in 1945, like, I get it. So what's your advice to us?
I think it's worth to mention that Madeleine Albright was born in Prague, in
Sure.
Czechoslovakia, and then had to fled the Czechoslovakia with her father, Josef Korbel, who was working as a diplomat for, in the ministry I'm head of now. And then she had a great career here in the United States, which had become her new home. So to remember this, it is very important to pass this legacy, to pass this message. Tomorrow will be her funeral in New York. I'm attending that too. So, honestly, I think our big policy decisions were done right on Ukraine. So my message for Antony Blinken will be 3 messages. I have 3 messages for him. Weapons, weapons, weapons. Yeah, we now really need to focus on how to make that Ukraine wins, and that we supply Ukraine with any necessary means, in time, in quality, in amount. And it is no longer about Soviet-produced weapons. It is about Western weapons, which will be provided and which are already being provided to Ukraine. Of course, it takes some time for the Ukrainian army to study these weapons and to learn them to use them properly. So it's not wasted resources. But, they say, okay, this weapon, we won't provide them with this weapon. It takes 3 months to learn it. The war is looming for 2 months. So would they start in December? They would be now perfectly ready. And during war times, these things usually go much faster. But of course,
Right.
with certain technologies, it cannot be done easily. But I think the Ukrainian army has proved that they are able to use highly efficiently drones. We are seeing all these images of drones, identifying targets, helping artillery, for example, to hit with very, very, very good precision targets. We have seen some drops, even though the original idea that Russians will dominate the airspace has not fulfilled. 50 or almost 60 days of war, Russians were not able to destroy Ukrainians' anti-air forces. Not completely, definitely they made a lot of damages, but every day we see Russians' planes shot down. So why not to help them with that more? And I admire Slovakia for the decision to give Ukraine the S-300 system, Soviet-made S-300 system. So it was a big decision. So really kudos to Slovakian government. And we should be looking for replacement with other ways. And of course, U.S. military industry and U.S. Army plays absolutely key role in that. There's no question about that.
Well, this is a meeting of foreign ministers in a time of war in Europe. Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you.
And thank you. And look, we all must do what we must do to support freedom and the legacy of the generation that brought us a united Europe.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Free.
Good luck, Minister. Pleasure to see you again.
Thank you.